Hong Kong is under attack. The Chinese Communist Party is imposing its tyranny on the city, but the resistance is on the rise. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Can music change the world? Who knows, but it might be able to at least change Hong Kong. That's what Denise Hocc hopes. She's one of the biggest pop stars in Hong Kong. She also had a huge following in mainland China. But she put all that at risk by joining the 2014 Umbrella Movement, a student-led movement to bring democracy to Hong Kong. The movement was not well received by those in power. For resisting Beijing's pressure, Denise Hocc found herself on the wrong side of the law. And then, the Chinese Communist Party canceled her tours in China and blocked her social media accounts. That hasn't stopped her from standing up for human rights. I sat down with Denise Hocc at the Oslo Freedom Forum to talk about the future of Hong Kong. Thanks for joining me today, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, recently two people from Hong Kong have come out and said that they got asylum in Germany. How does it feel to have Hong Kong be a place that people get asylum from now?
Well, you know, it's pretty ironic that because right now we are in face of this extradition law that is, you know, the Hong Kong government is trying to impose on us, and you know, but next week actually we will be having a very big protest in Hong Kong. So you know, we are fighting still after 5 years from the Umbrella Movement, even though it's a pretty dim situation right now in Hong Kong, since like we try to shout out our opinions, but the Hong Kong government is just not listening.
Do you think it's possible to get a fair trial in Hong Kong now? I mean, there's been legislators who have been kicked out of office, Umbrella Movement leaders who have been arrested and detained. Is the court still free?
Well, it really depends, you know, which judge you get.
Okay.
Well, that is my opinion. Like if you are, you know, lucky, fortunate enough, then you might get a judge that is unbiased, and then he or she would probably, you know, look at the facts. But you know, from my point of view, I think that some of the trials that went on during these 5 years were quite biased, and like say for the Hocc fishball revolution, you heard of it?
I have.
Yeah.
Why don't you say further?
Well, yeah, for the Hocc fishball revolution, there were like students and, you know, young generations who were sentenced for up to 7 or 8 years. So, I mean, they probably had to be prosecuted, you know, for the hassle that happened that night. But is it fair to have such a, you know, heavy sentence? And you know, we compare it a lot to what happened in 1967 when you know, there was a revolution back then with, you know, homemade bombs and all that, and even back then the sentences were not as strong as it is now. So and just recently the Umbrella 9, the activists who were involved in the Umbrella Movement, they were prosecuted and also sentenced for a lesser sentence, but still, you know, they were sentenced for half a year or so. But the fact is, the Umbrella Movement was not really started because of them. They were just put onto the stage, you know, just for intimidating, you know, the Hong Kong people, so that we won't, you know, get into another revolution like the Umbrella Movement. Yeah.
And I know you were one of the few cantopop singers who openly came out in support of the Umbrella Movement. And at the time, the South China Morning Post said that was career suicide. So what made you do that?
It was the moment when I saw the police throw the 87 tear gas bombs onto the peaceful protesters that, you know, I was just so angry at that moment, because it might seem not much, for other places where you get tear gas bombed all the time, but for Hong Kong, we never saw such a harsh reaction from the government, and the fact that the people who were on the streets, they were just everyday normal people. They had nothing. They had no weapons whatsoever, and for the police to react in such a way, it was so we got so angry and we were so frustrated, and the emotions that came out that day. And on that moment, I decided, just I don't care anymore, about what repercussions that might come if I spoke out. Yeah.
So was it career suicide?
Half.
Half
Yeah,
suicide.
Yeah. Half, suicide on the glamorous and extravagant side, where I would get commercials and the easy revenue that came from China, that was totally cut off.
Yeah. You couldn't tour as much in China or at all.
I cannot even get into China. Okay. Yeah, I was banned totally, and I was labeled Hong Kong poison.
That's right.
Yeah. And but on the other hand, I started my revolution of my own in the entertainment business, and and in 2016, when I was supposed to have a concert in the Hong Kong Coliseum, the biggest venue in Hong Kong, and normally you would have sponsors, backing you up, buying some of the tickets, and I got none of that. So what I did was I started a campaign to crowd sponsor the concert, and I broke up. If like normally the sponsorships would be 1 million Hong Kong dollars, then I broke it up into super small pieces, and I offered it to local businesses, and in the end we got 300 local businesses who backed us, and also 50,000 tickets sold out in hours.
That's incredible. I almost wish more Western businesses would hear that, so they might think twice about oh, there are options besides just caving into mainland China.
They are actually. Well, on the other hand, it's because I have a strong fan base, so I was pretty confident that even when I'm banned from China, they would be supporting me. But the key is, you have to be really flexible. Like, you cannot ride on the old ways, and you have to play a completely different game from what the traditional music scene is doing. Yeah.
Well, considering the levels of influence the Chinese Communist Party is having in Hong Kong, have you ever considered singing mainly in Mandarin?
Well, I did release 2 Mandarin albums, but that was mainly for Taiwan, the Taiwan market. And also before the umbrella movement, I was touring in China. I had this theater piece called, what was it called? 家宝玉, 家宝玉. Yeah, and it was based.
The dream of Black Mansion, Red Mansions?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I toured for 3 years in different cities of China, and I actually gathered, quite a number of fans during the pre-umbrella movement years. So the thing that I feel it's a shame is that I cannot reach these fans as much right now, but they get through. They find ways to get in touch with me.
Oh.
Yeah, they have the VPNs in China, and they just use that, and you see all these comments on Instagram, Facebook, and they are the support from China, but also at the same time we call them the 50 cents, like those who
on China Uncensored we know all about the 50 cent
but
army.
It's quite ironic because they have to get through the wall to come
onto platforms banned in China to criticize you.
Yes, that is funny at some
Well,
times,
to criticize Hong Kong poison, it's worth it. So I know your family originally fled China to Hong Kong to escape the Chinese Communist Party, and when it got close to the handover, they went to Quebec, right?
Yes.
Why did you go back to Hong Kong?
Well, this is something that my dad always, he's on me all the time, because they used up, a sum of money for us to get away from Hong Kong, and then I was the reason that, now everyone is back in Hong Kong because of me. So, but the reason why I decided to go back to Hong Kong was my attachment to the Cantonese, the Canto pop music scene, as my childhood teenage idol was the Canto pop diva Anita Mui. And so in 1996, I decided to get back to Hong Kong to do the contest that she did 15 years ago. And by accident, I won.
What do you mean by accident?
Well, I was just a fan chasing my idol, and I just wanted to, get in touch with her, try to get a glimpse of her. But of course, I really loved singing and performing, and but the main reason was because I wanted to see my idol. Yeah. So, but fate happened, and I won, and so I stayed in Hong Kong since 1997. So I went back from 1997, and I started my music career since then. How many years ago? 15, 20-ish? Yeah.
I know after the umbrella movement ended, there was sort of this idea that the young people of Hong Kong gave up or they were defeated. Is that true?
In a way, yes. Like, it was quite gloomy and difficult, very, very difficult 5 years. I mean, at first, I think the first 2 years, people were still fighting. Like, people got really angry and frustrated, and so there were different ways. Some people got very violent, and violent in a Hong Kong way, and they were quite heavily criticized by the pro-Beijing parties, which they used that as a tool to
sort of a smear everyone.
Yes, yes, and so that was when the prosecution and the political reprisal happened, and all those names that were detained and arrested during the umbrella movement, some of them were jailed, and then some of them were sentenced to different periods of time, and these 2 years, like, it's been quite depressing, a depressing time for the Hong Kong people, and especially the younger generations. Like, I have friends with families who chose to leave once again the city, like when my family did in the 80s. And most of them are young families with young children, because it's I could understand, I could relate to them, because if I had children right now, I would be quite worried, about what education they would be getting from the communist Hong Kong government, and there are much lesser discussion about what people should do in these times, because in a way we have tried a lot of things and it just didn't work, because we don't have the democracy system that we wish we had, and so the Hong Kong government, they just do what they want. They are not listening, and they are passing laws quite unjustifiably, and they are changing laws in favor of the Beijing government.
Well, with the new extradition law, has that changed how people feel? Because I know there was another big protest that happened because of that.
Yes. in a way, yes. If discussions are warming up now, and personally, I hope that after these different periods of frustration, disappointment, that people would come to realize that this is a very long war. This is a very long battle that cannot be won. A very long battle that cannot be won, just within 1 or 2 years. It's a very difficult process, and I think Hong Kong people are learning, and we are a population that is educated to be quick and instantaneous. So this thought and notion of patience is just not we're just very not accustomed to that. So we are learning to be more patient and to work our way through these very difficult issues. And just a few weeks ago, we had the first protest for the extradition law. And that was since the umbrella movement, that was the first time that the number of people surpassed 100,000, and that is encouraging, for those who had been still working hard at it, and so we hopefully the next protest on the 9th of June, it would gather more people, and even though we know that a protest might not change a lot of things, but personally, I think it is a form of unity, and where people can see each other, and then we can get back into that notion of we are not alone, and we are still here, we are still numbered, and something can still be done. Yeah.
What kind of support for Hong Kong would you like to see in the international community?
Well, as someone who has been, banned and rejected by global brands, I think, there is power in international unity. Because what I see is, people are afraid of losing the China market. So, brands and businesses, they choose to not speak out, and they choose to stand on the side of money. So I think if the international market, they realize that there are other choices. I don't mean we have to ignore the China market. That is just part of the international market. And so when people realize that that is not the only choice, and we have more important values and things that we should focus on, I think that might gradually, be a force that, we could rely on each other, to gain back some of the values and the virtues that, are so important to us.
So where do you see Hong Kong in 2047?
In 2047, that's
the big year.
Yeah, that is that is something that I really have no answer for. I know what the reality is, but at the same time, I am still optimistic in a way that even the tyrants, the big machines, there are people behind it, and so in a way, people make mistakes, and people make decisions that drive things in various ways. So now, how many years we have? 20-ish?
I can't do that, man.
Yeah. And so a lot could happen in this period of time, and I try to stay not positive but optimistic, and we have to keep this optimism. We have to keep this, this thought that we can make a change, even though it might be baby steps, but I think the power is really within the people, and if we do not give up, then who knows? Maybe something would change along the way.
Well, I think that's a great note to end this interview on. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Yeah.
And keep
you
up the
so
good
much.
work in Hong
Yeah.
Kong.
Okay. Thank you.